Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Living on the Verge. I'm Virginia, and this is one of those Friday episodes where we're just going to catch up on life. So, how's everybody doing? Did you have a good week? Has it been a rough one? Has it been a relatively easy one? Have you even had time to stop and think about how your week has been? Either way, it's Friday, so we're headed into the weekend, and I'm glad you're spending a few minutes with me as we get ready to do so. Today I have a winery review for you. I have some travel thoughts that I want to share with you. Some reality TV observations. It's been a while since we've chatted reality TV, and even though that isn't the main, content of this podcast anymore, y'all are never going to get your girl to stop watching reality TV. So to some extent, I'm always going to share it with you because that's part of what my daily life looks like anymore. Anyway, I just want to share a handful of things that have been kind of coming up lately because life has been surprisingly full around here and not necessarily exciting. Like I don't have tons of earth-shattering, monumental events to share with you, just full, which to me, as it turns out, is sometimes even better. I'm having a really good time. So let's get into today's episode and let's start off with what I think is my biggest victory by far. And it's also kind of a lesson. And I'm not going to make this a educational lesson-based podcast. But I just want you to hear the story and tell me what lessons you take away because I found it pretty funny what I learned about myself through having gone through this experience. So I may or may not have shared a little bit about this, but recently I got a letter in the mail from my homeowners association essentially saying that I was in arrears on my dues and I owed in excess of $500 between past due dues, interest, and penalties. And I was in a place where I was being asked to go before the HOA board and explain myself and or settle my debt because I have effectively been locked out of all of the community extras like the rec center and the pool and all that. Not the worst thing in the world because I can't remember the last time I actually used any of those things, but it was just the idea that this isn't right. This is wrong. It's untrue. It's incorrect. And I've been at the same location for almost 20 years and have never once been late on my dues. So what in the world is going on? And why is this the first I'm hearing of it? And why is the first I'm hearing of it, oh, you need to go before the board? What in the world? So I was getting ready to go travel and I did not want to have to take the ugly vibes of an unfinished situation with me. So I called the HOA office and I talked to them and I told them, look, I'm not going to be in town when this meeting is taking place. Therefore, I cannot go before the board. But I just want to go on record as stating that I'm disputing the validity of these charges because I cannot ever remember being late. And unfortunately, I will not be able to address it until I get back. So they noted my account and off I went. I came back. One thing turns into the next and you're still not dealing with the things that you're supposed to be handling. And then it kind of became one of those, I just don't want to make this phone call. We've talked about lists and lack of lists and too many lists. And let's just say this phone call lived on my lists for a long time, too long. And I finally made the call, you guys. That's really the moral of the story. But to get back to what happened, I called one place because they sent me an itemized list essentially of where I had gone and fallen behind. Only they had told me that I had short paid my account, which didn't make sense because my account's on auto pay and it pays the same amount every single month. Then another person told me the dues had gone up I think $6.50 some time back, and I never adjusted, and that was the issue. So given that I was being given different stories from different people, I knew it was going to take some time to kind of really sort this out. And we were talking about some exorbitant interest charges and penalties. So I was kind of annoyed with the whole situation. And I'll just be honest, I was not handling this the way I probably should have. I probably should have nipped it in the bud as soon as I could, but I didn't, because when I got back from traveling, I got sick, and it literally became the last thing I wanted to deal with, because I just kind of knew I was already annoyed about the situation to begin with. Well, I did do some digging and did find out that yes, in fact, the HOA dues had gone up $6.50. Wait for it. In January of 2024. We're in June of 26, guys. So 30 months ago, the dues went up $6, and nobody bothered to send a late notice or a, hey, by the way, I think there might be an oversight on your part. And I come to find out that I am getting electronic notices to an email that is no longer valid. And oh, by the way, I never approved said electronic notices. I like paper bills because the act of opening the letter and putting it in a pile reminds me that it's something that I have to pay. And even though things are on auto pay, I still like to make sure that everything got handled the way it was supposed to the prior month. But no harm, no foul, no notice, no problem, or so I thought. Well, when I finally got to someone who could help me, I was told essentially, yeah, your account's been short paid for over 2 years, and that's why you're being charged. Well, that wasn't okay. So what I did was I immediately paid the shortage of $6.50 times 30 months, and I sent a payment right away for that amount. But I still could not bring myself to get on the phone and sort through the mess. And so, I don't know, a week or so ago, I finally said, this is going to be my project for this week. And I know it's probably not as big as I'm making it, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. Long story longer, it took a week of telephone tag with the representative at the company, the third party company that services my HOA. And finally, this past week, I said, this is it. This cannot sit on my list any longer. I felt like it was holding me up from progressing in so many other areas of life, because I didn't want to get in a bad mood, but I kept seeing it on my list, and then it would get me angry all over again. And so finally last week, I made the call. Well, actually earlier this week, I made the call, and I got the person on the phone, and I mentioned the backstory that I just shared with you. And I said, I've been really reluctant to make this call because it's not, in my opinion, going to be a pleasant call. I'm disputing all of these charges because I never authorized going on electronic correspondence. And I think that it's highly irresponsible for a company to allow somebody to go 30 months in arrears and not send them any notification. And right away, she made me feel better. And she said, you know what? I understand where you're coming from. This is not the first time this has happened. Let's take a look and see what we can do. Within 5 minutes, I kid you not, she had looked into my account and discovered that, yes, I've been here for almost 20 years. And oh, by the way, I've never been late on an HOA payment. Yes, it has been received the same day every month for over a decade. And yes, they can see that the adjustment was not made in 2024. However, they could also see that I sent a payment bringing everything up to date. And so aside from the finance charges and the penalties, my account is current. And so how about if I help you? I can represent you before the HOA board and explain the circumstances and ask them for a waiver. Insert head exploding emoji. When I tell you guys, I was so relieved. I absolutely couldn't believe how much real estate I had given this phone call in my head over the preceding weeks, anticipating a fight, an argument, having to write letters, having to go before the board. Nope, it was none of that. It was none of that. She sent me an email asking me to reply to it to allow her to represent me before the board. And then she completed the email asking for them to waive all of these fees and charges. And she said, although I can't tell you when their next meeting is, I can tell you that I think you have a really good chance of getting all of these waived. And so if you don't hear anything in about 45 days, give me a call. But you should be receiving a letter with the decision. And I think you'll be okay. It took so much weight off of my shoulders, you guys. And it was a simple thing. Okay, so I share that story with you to go back to what's the lesson? Well, for me, the lesson was stop giving things so much agency in your life that you could control so simply by virtue of being uncomfortable for a few moments. So for me, because I did not want to have this conversation for 10 or 15 minutes, by the way, the entire thing from beginning to end took 18 minutes. And because I did not want to have that conversation, I let it hang over my head for weeks. It caused me stress. It caused me to be disappointed in myself because how could I have let this oversight happen? I'm better about these things. Even if I hadn't gotten a notice, I should have known better. On and on and on for 18 minutes of what could have been discomfort, but actually turned out to be a relatively pleasant conversation with the lovely young lady who totally and completely understood where I was coming from and was there to help me fix my problem. Stop procrastinating. Stop giving things in life so much agency and real estate in your head when a simple moment of discomfort that may not even be uncomfortable can make the whole thing go away. And so for me, it just made me realize how quickly everything changed once I acted. And also it made me realize that once I had that win under my belt, it kind of gave me some momentum to keep on going. And I've realized lately that some of the hardest things in life aren't actually hard. They're just avoided. We are making them hard by virtue of the fact that we're just avoiding getting them done. Okay, let's move on because it's been a while since I've given you all a health and fitness update. And I just want to be honest and I want to be forthcoming, but I also want to come straight out of the gate letting you guys know that I feel really good about things. So this is not a I'm going to beat up on myself session. This is I promised I would be honest about my health and wellness journey, and I have to be honest when things aren't going great too. So here goes. A few weeks ago, I kind of set off after all of my travels and all of the things that I had been doing that were taking me away from my weekly routine. I kind of set off to get back on track. And one day I got on the scale and I realized, oh my gosh, somehow I have managed to gain 8 pounds. And they're not 8 pounds that are water or, oh, you shouldn't have had that piece of chocolate before dinner or before bed last night. No, these were 8 pounds that were there to stay. They weren't going anywhere. And I jumped on the scale because I started noticing my clothes were fitting a little differently. And for me, that's always the tip off. And I knew this didn't happen overnight. I had been traveling. I was on cruises. I was, on multiple vacations. I was not cooking home a lot because in between those vacations, I wasn't about to stock my refrigerator and then leave a bunch of food here. So I had just kind of lost sight on healthy eating at home, doing all of the things that I wanted to do in my quest to be my healthiest, strongest self. And there were a lot of social events that I was going to, and I wasn't paying attention, but one meal at a time, I was having a baked potato here, or, a piece of bread there, or some extra butter on this day. And all these little choices added up to 8 pounds, if I'm being exact. But I didn't use it as a moment to be like, oh my gosh, all this work I've done, what am I going to do? I'm so behind the gun for my goal to look and feel my best by my birthday in July. None of that happened this time. Instead, I just had a moment of, okay, well, things aren't headed in the direction that you'd want them to be headed in, but to be fair, you're not doing the things that you're supposed to do for them to head in that direction. So instead of doing what you have done historically, which is try to figure out where you went wrong and how you could course correct and then come up with some 17-point strategy for making things better. You guys, I didn't do any of that. I know what works for me. I know what makes me feel strong. I know what makes me feel healthy. I know what foods my body responds to, and I know what foods my body does not like to get rid of and likes to hold on to right there in that little middle spot that drives me absolutely bananas. But nonetheless, day in and day out, for a while, I was doing it. And that was the result. Even though on the cruise, I went to the gym. Sure, I went to the gym, but I'm sure I was still taking in more calories than I was working off. So guess what I did? I did something altogether different than I normally do. I just made a decision to get up and take one day at a time. And a few weeks ago, I got up and I said, I'm making this too complicated. I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week and I'm going to walk twice a week. I'm going to eat and cook most, if not all of my meals at home. And when I eat out, I'm going to be conscientious of what I order. And that was it. I just did that. The biggest change was, instead of letting my day unravel, I would come downstairs, have my coffee, read my Bible, do my journaling, feed the dogs, get caught up in the morning routines, and then I'd wander into my office, or I'd wander into a room, or I'd start a load of laundry. And before you knew it, it would be 10, 11, 12 o'clock, and I'm an early bird. And yet I still hadn't gone to a gym. And now maybe it was too late or too hot to walk. And one thing would lead to the next, and I would make one excuse, and next thing you know, it'd be 2 weeks since I had last been to the gym. And I realized I was allowing myself too much latitude to make these decisions. I was waiting until I was motivated and I woke up one morning just dying to do squats. Who the hell was I kidding? Nobody wakes up dying to do squats. So instead, I adjusted my mindset and I said, tomorrow, I'm going to get up, I'm going to have my coffee, spend a few minutes reading a couple of passages out of the Bible. But before I go downstairs, I'm going to have my gym clothes on, my hair is going to be in a ponytail, and I'm going to have my shoes and my sneakers on. And as soon as I get done with that cup of coffee, if it's walk day, I'm heading out to my walk. And if it's gym day, I'm jumping in my car and going to the gym. Before anything else happens, before I have a chance to convince myself that there are way more important things to do today. And I'm here to tell you it's been working. I have managed to put together a couple, if not a few weeks of gym 3 times a week, walk twice a week, pretty religiously. And the takeaway and the bonus is that I come back with more energy. My day is more productive. And the secret, the spoiler is I'm not waiting for the motivation. I can't wait for the motivation. I just had to get up and do it. And so I'm going to continue to do that and see how that translates into furthering my health and wellness journey. But like I said a few minutes ago, I already know what works. So getting back to what works should serve me well. And I'm now fully convinced, you guys, that I'm never going to feel like going to the gym. I'm never going to wake up excited to go to the gym. I honestly think that's a myth sold to us by fit people. Anyway, life has been feeling a lot lighter lately. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm rested. Maybe the vacations did me well. Maybe having time to cross things off my list has opened up my mind to be more relaxed. I can't quite explain it, but life just feels a little lighter. You know, nothing huge has changed. The house that I'm living in is the same house I've been living in. My life is pretty much the same daily. I'm in the same marriage. Nothing has changed dramatically in my financial picture one way or the other. Yet somehow I feel less pressure and I feel lighter and freer and more resolute. And I'm just really happy to be feeling those things. I'm truly grateful for small changes that lead to big joys in my life. So it's time for reality on the Verge. And I'm just going to share with you what I've been watching lately. One of my favorite things about summer is that my expectations for television go way down. And you'll understand what I mean when I get into what I've been watching lately. First of all, the reality shows that are on right now, I don't know, maybe my season of loving Housewives is behind me. I can't believe I said that in my out loud voice because I still really, really want to love the Housewives. But I've been watching The Real Housewives of Rhode Island, and in as much as I'm watching it because there's not a lot else on right now, I'm still not convinced that it's for me. And that's not because it's a bad show. Once I finally was able to tell the difference between each of the girls, and once I stopped confusing Liz for Dolores, and I realized that the dynamics of this show were very similar to those of the other housewives shows, and that there's kind of the badass bitch, and there's the, you know, the meek and mild girl who gets run over, and there's the superstar who's tamping it down, and so on and so forth. You have all the peoples. And because we have all of the peoples, we have the same drama. You have the one that is, you know, being cheated on but refuses to see it because she's committed to being with her husband and or her lifestyle and doesn't want it to change. But that's neither here nor there. All of that said, Rhode Island will probably come back. There are a lot of people who really like it a lot. And I don't hate it. I'm just not as into it as I think I should be for someone who likes the Housewives as much as I profess to. And so we'll see. We have season 20 of Real Housewives of Orange County, which was my all-time favorite, coming back soon. And I hear that it's not the very best of seasons. So I'm already a little reluctant because it's supposed to be such a banner season marking 20 years of the Housewives, yada, yada, yada. And so the fact that word on the street is that it's not one of its strongest seasons kind of concerns me a little, not just for Orange County, but for the Housewives franchise in general. I feel like Bravo may have missed the boat on this and should probably be leaning into what's going on down in Miami right now, because there's drama going on with Lenny Hochstein. There was drama going on with Lisa. There is so much that we are missing because we don't have Miami, but apparently y'all ain't watching it. And so if you're not going to watch it, then it's not going to stay on the air. And therefore it is in eternal pause mode. Let's just say that. So what else have I been watching? Oh, you guys, I watched the Michael Jackson documentary. Did you guys see that? So I didn't go see the movie yet, even though I want to see the movie. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding this man and his legacy and all things, but I am one who believes that two things can be true. He could be a not great human being and still be a really talented musician. And so without getting into which side of the fence I fall on for this, that, or the next, I just want to tell you this documentary left me shooketh because I was there when all of this stuff was going on. I was there for the trials. I remember hearing about the little boy with cancer, all of these things that they cover in this documentary. But yet what shocked me was what the family was able to keep from getting out. If you watch this documentary, some of the things that were known at the time that were pretty sinister were not made available to the general public. And it was very obvious that regardless of what was going on with Michael back in the day, the end goal was to make sure that the Jackson family legacy was preserved at all costs. And I'm going to be pretty honest, even though a lot of garbage and a lot of controversy did happen with regards to Michael, you guys watch this documentary if you want to see everything you guys were shielded from, because it is earth-shattering to me that this man was still allowed to grace our stages when all of this had been known about him and admitted by him. And so that one really blew my mind, the Michael Jackson documentary. I think it's on Netflix. It's pretty good. I also watched The Crash, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this because I may have even talked about it once before. I can't remember, but I think the girl is absolutely a sociopath, if not a psychopath. And I have absolutely no doubt that there was some sort of unknown intention in this whole thing. She is culpable, and even in her interviews at the end, it was creepy. So I won't spend a lot of time on it, but the long and the short of it is that this girl essentially killed her boyfriend and his friend, ran him into a wall. She says that it was a medically induced situation. Then they at one point had said that the car had malfunctioned. All of those things were disproved, and she is serving a jail sentence now. But they do interview her from jail, and she still maintains innocence. So if you're interested in those sorts of shows, that was a pretty interesting watch. It wasn't long and dragged on. I thought it was done pretty well. And is it just me, or is everybody else hearing grumblings and rumblings about a Crystal Kung Minkoff comeback to the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills? And how do we feel about that? Because if you ask me, I want her back. I've been wanting her back. I think now is the time for her to come back. I listened to her podcast with Cynthia Bailey from the Real Housewives of Atlanta, and this girl is in full blossom mode right now. And I think that especially if Amanda Francis comes back, it would make for a real pivot in the energy that we are getting out of Beverly Hills without losing the glamour and the kind of, I don't want to say ostentatiousness, because I don't find Crystal ostentatious at all, but she is definitely wealthy. And she definitely leads a lifestyle of privilege. And that's what we look to when we look to see Beverly Hills, right? So I am team, please bring Crystal back. And there is word on the street that she may be in talks for a contract. And if that's the case, please add me to the list of yes pleases on that one. And let's move on to Love Island. I think I aged out, y'all. I think I aged out. I try. And yes, the drama of it started to captivate me probably, 6 or 7 episodes in, but I could not handle the first few episodes. I mean, it's just graphic and unnecessary, and I think that I've just aged out. So if you're watching Love Island and you are one of the many who can't wait to tune in every night, would you please DM me and tell me what about it is so incredibly captivating? Because either I've aged out or I'm just missing the boat. And I am anxious to find out what it is about it that I am missing. Well, I don't even watch Summer House, but summer of 2026, I would be remiss to not talk about what happened on episode 3 of the Summer House reunion. In particular, I'm referring to the fact that, was Amanda on something? So there was all this talk about beta blockers. It even came up on the reunion, and Andy asked West if that's why he was kind of flat and unemotional with regards to everything that was going on. At one point, he kind of says, like, you've really hurt everybody on this stage and they are very emotional and you're not. Is it the beta blockers? Okay. The critique for Andy is that he let Amanda off very easily as she sat there practically drooling because she was so, allegedly sedated. Now, I'm not there and I don't even know this woman, so I don't know what the heck she does on the day-to-day. And if she took something to calm herself down so she would be less reactionary, then that's what she did. But if it's a beta blocker, I don't want any of those because I don't want to look and feel the way she looked and felt on that stage. She looked like she was ready to fall asleep, like she could not formulate a sentence. And I don't think it did anything to serve the cause of trying to make us gain favor back with Amanda. I don't. I think that if anything, it made them more polarizing and it made us like the whole thing a lot less. So maybe that's why we're getting a part 4. I don't know. And like I said at the start of this, I don't even watch it, but I'm in tune enough to know that what Amanda and Wes did is pretty crappy. And I'm not a fan. So that's pretty much it for reality on the Verge, except for a funny ending. It's funny how when there's not a lot to watch, you start to ask yourself, well, what do I miss? What do I want to watch? And at different seasons of life, the answer is going to be different. You know what I've been into lately? Law and Order. Dun dun. I'm talking OG Law and Order. Like, I've really been enjoying the episodes. And one of the things that I'm finding kind of entertaining is we have come a long way with regards to DNA testing and technological advances since the beginning of this series. So when you watch some of the older episodes, you're like, just test the DNA, just trace the cell phone. And then you remember those weren't things back then. And so I find it kind of charming to watch these episodes, and they've been getting me through these lovely, I guess, late spring, early summer evenings where there's not a whole heck of a lot on television, but you're not ready to go to bed yet. So that's reality on the Verge this week. And let's move right on into travel on the Verge, because I've mentioned it a few times throughout the course of this podcast, but I have been traveling, you guys. I have been to San Juan, Puerto Rico. I have been to several islands in the Caribbean, and I'm going to save the full Caribbean trip for another day because there's a lot to unpack. I think I went to 6 or 7 islands, But I want to talk just a little bit about Old San Juan, Puerto Rico, because we stayed across the street from the governor's mansion, and it is a small, sleepy town. The blue cobblestone streets that you see on social media and on travel websites are just as charming and beautiful in person. We walked down to the water, got to see the old fort, and we had a nice dinner at the Mexican restaurant. And my first impressions of Old San Juan were different than what I envisioned in my head. But we had a really lovely afternoon there the first day we got there. And then we had the whole next day to kind of just explore. And it's a small town. It can easily be done in one day. One of my biggest surprises, I guess, was all of the bars all over all of the buildings. And yet you got this sense that there was high crime, but everybody was walking around the streets without a care in the world. And that was kind of an interesting impression. It was a wild observation. In fact, the day we left to board the cruise, they were having demonstrations in the streets. And I had never seen so much police presence in my life. But again, it was because we were staying across the street from the governor's mansion. And as such, they were guarding the mansion. I had a really good time, and I'd love to go back to Old San Juan and to Puerto Rico in general and explore and enjoy more of the culture, more of the food, and kind of maybe see a little bit more of other parts of Puerto Rico. But I really did have a good time. And I also spent a week in Palm Springs with some friends and my husband, and we had a lovely time. It was a much needed kind of exhale, relax, vacation. Not the kind of vacation that you go on when you're on a cruise and you have a port to visit every day, or an excursion every other day, or a certain time that you have to be at meals, but the kind of vacation where you just go with the flow and do what you want. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a future travel on the Verge. But one of the funny things that happened that wasn't so funny at the time was I got a bee sting in my belly. And that was not a fun moment when it happened, but it was very funny in how it happened. I went to go put my purse over my shoulder, and at the very same moment, a bee was flying by, and I trapped it up between my purse and my belly. And well, it had no choice but to sting me. And so there I sat while my friend looked for fabric at a quilt store, trying to stop the itching and the burning of my bee sting. And that was a very, very small tidbit of a fantastic week in Palm Springs. And I'll share more of it with you very soon. But it's time to move on to Winos on the Verge, because yes, I did finally get back to my winery routine, and I am so glad to be back at it. This is my quick, honest review of where I went, what I drank, and if I'd go back. And this week, we visited Masia de la Viña on the Di Portola Trail in Temecula. And honestly, I really enjoyed the location of this winery. It isn't up on the highest mountain or doesn't have the most expansive view of, the valley, but it is situated in such a place that you have a really pretty view of these rolling hills, and you don't get a lot of street view. So you kind of feel like you're not in the middle of a city. You kind of feel like you're out on a day trip of sorts. And so we walk in, and I really thought it was a charming little place. It is very boutique-y. It had a cute little store that you could shop in for, cute things, glasses and earrings and little wallets, and of course hoodies from the winery and sweatshirts and stuff like that. But what I really liked was that the moment I walked in, I got greeted with a huge smile by who would end up being my pourer and her name was Karen. Now, Masia de la Viña is also owned by the same people that own Danza, and I have done a review on Danza before, and I really enjoyed it. And if you remember, I mentioned it back then because if you are a member at Danza, you get half off wine tastings at Masia, and if you're a member at Masia, you get half off wine tastings at Danza. So it's a really good deal for people looking to get a lot out of their wine club memberships. It's one of the more giving memberships in the Valley, in my opinion. So what did I drink? Well, I started off with the Sparkling Brut, compliments of Karen, and my friend tasted the Magrana, which was also a sparkling. It had pomegranate and blood orange, and I didn't taste it, but I did give it a good whiff, and I got to tell you, it smelled wonderful. It had this fruity, I don't know, I want to say perfumey odor, but it didn't come across in the flavor from what my friend said. And then I had the Verdelho. Now, the Verdelho for me was a little dry and a little flat, but to be fair, I'm not a huge white wine drinker. However, when it gets hot, I always enjoy a nice glass of white wine. And so I am on the hunt for something that I could enjoy with a lovely fish dinner, or even just, hanging out with charcuterie on a hot afternoon. And I'm going to say I haven't found it in the Verdelho yet. So I moved on to the reds. The Garnacha was nice. Light. I would really enjoy it with like a chicken dinner, or even with a nice Caesar salad at lunch. It was light enough that you can get away with doing that. And by far, my favorite was the Monastrell. Now, I don't know if this is just a matter of taste, but have you noticed I'm really enjoying Monastrells these days? $46 a bottle. It was by far my favorite. I also had tastings of the Malbec and the Cab Sauv, and my favorite part about this winery was the experience with the pourer. And what I told my friend is it is mind-boggling how much better the wine tastes when the person pouring the wine makes you smile and feel comfortable. It's such a different experience. So, would I go back? Darn tootin' I would. I thought it was very nice. The atmosphere was nice. I enjoyed the benefits. And of course, the hospitality was remarkable. So they have a 2-for-1 tasting on their website. If you scroll to the bottom, you should be able to find it. Tastings cost you $25. Again, my notable was the Monastrell. And I will give Masia de la Viña 3 wine glasses. And that's it for Winos on the Verge this week. And you guys, that's also it for this episode. One thing I've been noticing lately is life looks almost exactly the same as it did a few months ago. I'm in the same house, same people in my life, same responsibilities, but somehow it feels different. And I think maybe I've stopped trying to solve every future problem before it arrives. And that's helping me to create a little more room to actually enjoy the life I'm living right now, today, Friday, which honestly feels like a pretty good place to leave things this week. So, thanks for hanging out with me for another Friday episode of Living on the Verge. If you're enjoying the show, please follow, subscribe, share it with a friend. And I'll be back on Tuesday with a slightly deeper conversation. Until then, do me a favor, pay attention to real life, the fun parts, the messy parts, and what they're trying to teach you. And until next time, I'll be right here, living on the verge. Have a great weekend.